We are, okay. All right, we are in Acts chapter 17, starting around verse 16 tonight. We finished up with getting Paul kicked out of Thessalonica, and then he got chased out of Berea, and then his buddies put him acted like they were putting him on a boat, but he really traveled probably by land, but he took off and went to Athens, and that's where it ended last time. Said, immediately the brethren sent Paul away to go to the sea, but both Silas and Timothy remained there. So those who conducted Paul brought him to Athens, and receiving a command for Silas and Timothy to come to him with all speed, the ones who conducted him departed. Okay, so Paul's now in Athens by himself, pretty much. He doesn't have any support. A lot of theologians talk about that in it talks about in Paul's ministries through these letters and through the book of Acts, that this is probably emotionally the lowest point Paul ever gets. He's in a foreign city, doesn't seem to know anybody there. It doesn't look like that anyway. It seems like his ministry has been one conflict after another conflict after another conflict. People keep trying to kill him, beat him, throw him out. And, he's got to be wondering if he's doing any good. And it's now at the point where he's in Athens and he's waiting. And when it says that in the scripture that he's waiting, that is kind of unusual for us to hear, because we don't see Paul as somebody who sits and waits. We see him as constantly as a man of action, okay? And in this passage, when we read it, it doesn't seem like a whole lot goes on when he goes to the synagogue, but he's going to have a different kind of a conflict here, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So he winds up in Athens, and ancient Greece at one point in time ruled the world. And even in Paul's day, it was a powerful Greek city-state under the power of Rome, except it was self-governing under Rome. And a lot of historians have called Athens the greatest city that there ever has been, and that no city today can match the glory of Athens in its heyday. But when you think about that, I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, we got skyscrapers, we got the internet, we got all this stuff and everything, but everything we have and everything we build and design is based on what started in Athens, which is interesting. The math we use for our computers, well, math started in Greece. I mean, our Western version of math and geometry and all of that, calculus, started there. No other country has had as many advancements as Greece, which is funny when you think about it. When you look at, a lot of cities are known for one big thing, but they were known for math, science, literature, architecture, art, drama, you name it. And they were just, they were the pinnacle of everything in their day and knew things all the time. Education was really highly valued. Mike? Yes, at this time.
Did they have an emperor or a king or something?
They right now in Greece, at this point in time where we're at right now, Corinth is the capital, okay? And it's the business center and the political capital. Rome is the power broker over everybody, but Athens maintains its standing as the center of art, math, philosophy, education. All of the really big think tank people were there. Socrates and Plato were from there. Aristotle adopted it as his city. And it was kind of like the Oxford, Harvard, Yale kind of area of the world at that point. And even in Paul's day, that's what it was known for. High education, a lot of thinking, a lot of that kind of stuff, okay?
Rome kind of let them...
They let them kind of like Philippi.
Let them govern themselves.
Yeah, no taxes, let them govern themselves, probably kept the peace in that area. And it was mutually beneficial to both parts, to both of them. So, Rome didn't try to govern by keeping their thumb on people so much as some other dictatorships or empires did. So like with the Jews, they tried to get along with the Jews. They were very difficult to get along with, but they tried. So one of the other things that's important, so much of our Western civilization is dependent on what went on in Greece. I mean, they were the first country to practice modern day democracy and have modern day courts. And actually in 508 BC, they allowed adult free men the vote. Not only could they vote, but they could stand up and question and ask and debate what they were voting on. They could go to where the politicians were talking about laws, and they had the right to say so, and they were given the right. Now, women, slaves, and foreigners were not allowed to vote, okay? And just like Chicago, though, they didn't allow the dead to vote either, all right? So, but there was a lot of expectation for citizens to participate. It was highly encouraged, and you were considered a poor citizen if you didn't participate in the government of the country, which is great, which is unusual. And over all of that was this idea of that they felt that they were intellectually above everybody else, and that if you couldn't logically reason something, then sit down. That's kind of, they wanted to hear from the people who were logical thinkers. So when you look at that today and you think about, if you go to a lot of cities that are famous for art, and you think about France, and you think about Rome in Italy, and you think about some of the other Florence and other places in Europe that are famous for art, but if you look at their artwork, it's mostly copies of things that Greece did. And even if some of the stuff wasn't original to Greece, the style was original to Greece. So that's kind of interesting, I think. Architecture, even here in the United States, we have columns out here in front of this porch out here. That's from Greece, Greek and Roman columns from that time frame. So a lot of our architecture is the same. A lot of our politics is the same. Our court system is the same. So they were the pioneers of art and drama. Most nations didn't put on large productions or plays or anything simply for entertainment. That wasn't done before Greece started doing it. So another thing that they pretty much instituted on a large scale was athletics. They were the first ones to have the Pan-Athenian Games, the Olympic Games. That all came from there. So lots of aspects of Western culture came from the city of Athens. And this is where we find Paul. Now, Paul, very, very highly educated, because the city that he's from is also an education center. Tarsus had a university. Paul spoke multiple languages. He was highly trained. He was very, very well read, not only just in the studies he'd done on the Old Testament in the Pharisee schools and the Jewish aspect. We're going to see and hear that Paul has a very broad education, because he quotes two of the Greek poets. And the passages that he quotes to them off the cuff are pretty obscure. So we know from all those kind of things that Paul's education was not just limited to the religious factor of his education. His education was very broad, and God used all of that. So one thing people can't take from you is knowledge, okay? And so get all you can get. That's my grandmother used to tell us that all the time. Get all the knowledge you can get. Of course, one of the other things about Athens is that they had gods everywhere, all right? The whole mythology thing. The city itself is named after the goddess Athena, who is the goddess of war, okay, and the goddess of wisdom. I'm not sure how you put those two things together, but that's what she was, the goddess of war and wisdom. And her role in the mythology thing was to protect the city of Athens. Every building in the city had a dual purpose. So like the building of public records was also a temple. Okay, so every building not only had a function, a civic function, but it also had a function as a house for one of the gods, if that makes sense. So they also had gods for everything, they have gods for every emotion. They have the God of mercy, they have the God of grace, they have the God of compassion, the God of anger, the God of lust, you name it, okay? One of the other things is, and it kind of makes sense, I hadn't really thought about it, but I don't usually think in military terms, but they had a massive navy. Which might be one of the reasons that Rome played nice with them, because if Athens has a massive navy and Rome is over Athens, that means Rome has their navy. So they had a massive navy, and that was pretty impressive for them as well. So a lot of interesting things about them. You can go there today and see lots of ruins. We saw the ruins of this. This is the Parthenon. Our guide told us that, of course, it doesn't look like this today. This is what it would have looked like. It's a lot of columns standing up and it's part of the front. But she took us to the front and she said, tell me what you see. And we're like, okay, I see a building. She said, yes, but notice when you're standing here in the front, you can see along both sides all the way to the back. And she said in a normal building, when you stand in front of it, you can see the sides, but then the back, the sides along the side and the back all disappears because you can't see. But the building was built every few feet, just a fraction of an inch out further as you went back, so that you could see get the entire impressiveness of the hugeness of this building while you stood in front of it. You could see all the way down the sides. I thought that was interesting. Can you imagine the geometry and math it took to do that? And who thought that up? Yeah, kind of amazing. Great architecture, all kinds of stuff. All right. Their Colosseum, by the way, is the only one in the world that was completely made out of pure white marble. So if you know anything about marble, it breaks easily and it's hard to work with. So that's in itself is a big feat. So here's where Paul is. He's in this totally different kind of city that he's been in. And a lot going on. But Paul's reaction to this city is a lot different than the reactions that most people would have when they would step into the city. So let's look at what the scripture says, starting in verse 16 of chapter 17 in Acts. It says, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, what is this babbler trying to say? Others remarked, he seems to be advocating foreign gods. They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, may we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean. All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, people of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, we want to hear you again on this subject. At that, Paul left the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. So let's look and see what all this says. Well, we talked about, it says while Paul was waiting, and that's not his normal. But you know, God designed this probably for a dual purpose. Paul probably needed some rest to heal from some of his wounds, from the beatings he's had, and running for his life and all of that, and some emotional and spiritual healing as well. But God also designed it so that he's here in this place because he has another job for him to do here as well. Okay? It says he's greatly distressed, and the word there is provoked in his spirit. And it's the same term that gets used when he and Barnabas have to part ways because they're so mad and loud and angry at each other. They are both so, it basically means furiously angry. They were infuriated. And so that's Paul. He's walking around this city, and most of the time when we go to a different city, we're like, hey, look at that, look at that, look at this. Did you see that building? Did you see this? Look at that statue. Look at this fountain. Look at that park. You know, there's all these amazing things to look at. And as tourists, we want to take it all in, and we want to see it all, right? And Paul, though, he's not walking around oohing and ahhing. He's walking around angry. He's angry at what he's seeing because he says he sees that the city was full of idols, full of idols. So there's two reasons here that he's upset, okay? He's upset in his spirit, and he's upset emotionally, okay? He's upset over, number one, the lost. The city's full of people who are lost, and he gets that. And that's part of the reason he's furious and so that he's distressed. What do you think the second reason is? Doesn't like women? Oh, he doesn't like waiting. Yeah, he probably doesn't like waiting. I'm sure that's right, too. Yeah. But it's got to do with seeing that the city is full of idols. Why does that bother him so much? Obviously, because it leads people astray, so we have the lost. Why else does that bother him? The Jews aren't doing any good work there. Yeah, that's right. Now that it says he reasoned in the synagogue, so we know there is a synagogue there. For some reason, nothing really happens at this synagogue at this point in time. When there are, what are idols for? Worship. Okay. What's that? Yeah, they're worshiping foreign gods. But it's not so much that he's upset that they're worshiping foreign gods. Yes, he is because they're lost. But why he's so angry is because God's glory is being stolen. God is being robbed of the glory that's due him every time somebody bows to one of these idols. That glory is not supposed to go to fake idols. So really, who's getting the glory here?
My Bible says that there were 73,000 idols in the past time.
Yeah, the whole city was filled with them. In fact, here it says full of idols, and in the Greek it says completely full or wholly full. Not holy, but completely wholly full. Completely full of items. 73,000. Yeah, that's a lot of idols. Yeah. So the idea that anytime anything is getting worshiped that isn't God, God is being cheated. God is being robbed of glory that is due him. Think about that. And Paul, he's angry about that. He's really upset about that. It's misplaced glory that robs God of his due glory. Okay? So in Psalm 69, we have this verse. David says, "For zeal for your house has consumed me, and the reproaches of those who reproached you have fallen on me." David said, those people who are talking smack about you, God, that falls on me. Why? Because I represent you. I am yours. And as believers, we are, like we talked about Sunday in church, we are temples of the living God. We are God, he dwells within us. So when God's name is taken in vain, when God is mocked, when scripture is laughed at, whatever, then we should feel something. We should at least be a little bit disturbed. This verse gets quoted again in the New Testament. What? Tell me.
Last week I saw on the news where they had the satanic statue in the Capitol, in one of the northeastern states, and it has the satanic,
Yeah.
I know separation of religion, church and state, and then I think Dallas Fort Worth Airport was getting ready to put in washing stations.
For the Muslims, but they turned it away. They refused at the last minute.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that if
Mm-hmm.
Christians tried to do something like that, we never
Hear the end of it.
given considered.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's offensive to us to watch this stuff happen.
It should be offensive to us. And I think that's the point of this verse. It should be offensive to us. If we truly are God's people and we truly represent Him, and if He truly dwells in us, then when He is mocked, when He is reproached, when He's made fun of, then we should feel it. But where was this quoted again? Do you remember? In the New Testament. Jesus quotes this verse when He cleanses the temple. He says, "Zeal for your house has eaten me up," when he cleans out the robbers. Interesting, huh? Because what was taking place in that temple, He said, this is supposed to be a house of prayer, and you've made it a security blanket for thieves. You've made it a den for thieves. And it's supposed to be a house of prayer where people who are lost can come, where the Gentiles can come. And their marketplace was set up in the court of the Gentiles, so it made it impossible for any non-Jew to even come to the temple. And so Jesus said, "Zeal for your house has consumed me." You know, we see that kind of zeal in a couple other places in the Old Testament. Elijah, he was so angry, and the zeal to get the Baal priest gone, it just consumed him. And you could see that in how he talked. When Moses came down from the mountain and found them worshiping a golden calf, and his brother Aaron, who was supposed to be second in command and who was supposed to be the priest, was the one who made it. He's so mad and angry, he crushes the stone tablets, grinds them into powder, mixes it with water, and makes the people drink it. He was mad. He's mad. Why? Because he sees his people giving this golden calf the glory that belonged rightfully to their God, to Jehovah. But he wasn't getting that glory. Later on, we see Aaron's grandson. The Midianites have come in and brought their women in, and they're seducing the Israelite men so that they can intermarry with them and destroy the nation of Israel. It's a whole satanic plot, and God is punishing the people for that with a plague. And so while this plague is going on, Aaron's grandson Phinehas sees an Israelite man and woman in a tent doing what the lady came there to do, okay? And it says he rushed to the tent and he pierced a spear through them both. One spear through them both. You get the picture, okay? And it talks about the zeal of Phinehas. God honored the zeal of Phinehas, and it is his line from Aaron that the priesthood comes out of. It gets narrowed down from all of Aaron's sons to this one grandson. And if you weren't related to that grandson, you couldn't be a priest. And God honored that kind of zeal because he says, this should not be done. This is an affront to our God. So we should be upset when we see things, right? We should make our opinions known. We should feel something about it. And that's where Paul is. He is distressed and angry. He's having a spiritual response to it because it's full of idols. And you know, he never says one word in here about the architecture. He never mentions the art. He never mentions all these beautiful buildings or the Colosseum. He doesn't mention any of that stuff. What he sees is the souls of the people who are lost, and the fact that God is being so totally dishonored in this city. Okay? So when we go, you know, if an engineer goes, he looks at the buildings, and if an artist goes, they see the paintings. You know, if military people go, they see the soldiers and the cannons and all that, you know. And I had a friend who was a pharmacist, traveled all over the world. She took pictures of pharmacies everywhere she went. She had whole albums full of pictures of pharmacies. But Paul saw people's souls. He saw that they were lost. He saw that God wasn't getting glory. And Paul, with his education, and very highly educated, well-equipped to do something about it. But he has this emotional response, and he doesn't just get upset and angry and go on. It moves him to do something about it. And you know, we can get upset. I remember when we went to Italy this last October? Is that when we went? We went to Italy last October, and it was a great trip. And there's lots of statues and lots of art and everything else. But I felt very, I don't want to go again. I don't want to go there again. I don't know. Yeah, it's amazing art. I'm amazed that people can actually do that kind of thing. I didn't like it. And I'm not standing up here saying because I'm so holy or not, but I didn't see anything spiritually uplifting about it. Let me put it that way. And it just seemed it was everywhere. It was everywhere. And we did see the Pope. We did see the Pope in his Pope mobile. We toured the Vatican. Yeah, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I felt it was very offensive. In every cathedral we went in, Mary was a huge statue front and center, and Jesus was over here off to the side. So yeah. I'm not saying don't go to Italy and experience it for yourself. Go right ahead. It is amazing. But there's something about it that's disturbing as well. And you have all these Roman god statues still there. You know, all the ancient things that are still there. And it is amazing to see things that are that old, but I don't know. All right. So here we have Paul, nobody with him, and it's one man against this huge city full of, how many did you say, Mike? 73,000 statues, pagan? 73,000 idols. One man against that. When I was reading through this, in the commentary, the author said, that's trying to sweep the ocean back with a broom. And I thought, yeah, it would feel like that, wouldn't it? How would most of us react in that situation? What would be your thought? Throw my hands up. Yeah, what can I do? What can I do? I'm just me. And the next thing even if you were pushed to action, maybe the next thing you would do would be, I got to get some help. Let me get a committee together, okay? Let me get some friends. Let's vote on this. Let's see if I can't get some support or whatever. But Paul never does that. I don't think we ever see him with a committee. He never calls a committee meeting. He never does that. So what did he do? He does what he always does. He goes to the synagogue first, and he reasoned, and remember that word was he had a question-answer back and forth debate with both the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, okay, the ones who were searching for the real God. Can you imagine being one of those God-fearing Greeks living in the city of Athens, and you're looking for something besides one of these 73,000 idols? You probably weren't real popular. He says, but as well as in the marketplace, and the word there is the agora, and that is the typical Greek Roman model for all of the cities, that there's a huge marketplace in the middle. But it's more than just a market. Yes, there's stalls there where people sell things and you can go buy stuff, but there's also storytellers, and there's people who are debating politics and religion, and there's people who are hawking the latest cure for this or that or the other, and there's people doing magic acts, and kind of reminds me of like when you go to Vegas and you got the guy who's painted in silver paint holding a newspaper, and you know all those different people, or somebody playing a guitar, playing some music. So you've got everything going on there. Busy place. And it says Paul goes there in the marketplace, and day by day, that means a continuing action, day after day after day, he is reasoning with those who happen to be there. In the Greek it says, whoever crossed his path. Whoever crossed his path, that's what he's doing day after day, is reasoning and debating with them and asking them questions about the living God. Can you imagine?
He doesn't say argue.
Debating. It's like questions and answers. He's not being rude or anything like that. He's reasoning, using his brain, appealing to their sense of logic, their sense of experience or whatever. And then Luke tells us something that doesn't even seem like a necessary detail until you figure out what it really means. It says a group of Epicurean philosophers and a group of Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. And I guess that was the goal, really, in God's mind anyway. You know, he's just debating with anybody who will listen. He finally gets the notice of these two groups of philosophers. Now, these kind of philosophers, it's older than this time frame. I think the Epicureans were at least 400 years old by this point, so that their philosophy had been around for a long, long time. So had the Stoics, and they're kind of at opposite ends of what they teach and what they preach. Where are we at? Here we go. some notes on that. The Epicurean philosophy teaches that a few things that are totally against what we believe about life in general, okay? They're pretty much materialist, all right? They believe in the here and the now. They believe that the only emotion you're supposed to feel is pleasure, okay? They avoid pain. The avoidance of pain is the chief purpose of mankind. Avoid all pain. That's their chief purpose, okay? They don't deny the existence of all these gods, because that probably would get them in big trouble. But they don't believe any of these gods interfere with the day-to-day things of mankind. They also don't believe that there's any afterlife. They believe once you die, and that's it, okay? The body and soul disintegrate. There's no afterlife. So if they don't believe there are any gods interfering with the affairs of people, then there's no accountability, right? No accountability. And if they don't believe there's a heaven or an afterlife, then they also don't believe there's a hell. So again, no accountability, okay? So if you believe that the highest goal of man is to avoid pain and that there's no accountability from the gods while you're here on earth and there's no afterlife afterwards, then what's left with your philosophy? Do whatever you want to do and feel good doing it. That's their philosophy pretty much, okay? Pleasure, do everything for pleasure. Now, the Stoics, on the other hand, were kind of opposite, but still they're really off track, okay? They believed that the highest virtue was self-control, okay? Self-control. They believed that you should be indifferent to pain and indifferent to pleasure. Your emotions don't matter. You're to be in control of your emotions at all time. You're supposed to reach a state where you feel nothing. You feel nothing, you can't be disappointed, okay? And opposite of the Epicureans, they believed there was a God for every single emotion. Okay, well, if they're going to have to control their emotions, they better have a God for every single emotion, right? So they have that as well. So they're the good guys, kind of, in that they believe God is in everything, okay? The chair is God, God's in the chair, you're God, God's in you. You know, there's gods in the flowers. Kind of like Hindus or hippies from the 60s and 70s, okay? God is everywhere. God is in everything. You can't kill anything. If it's got eyes, it's got a soul, so you can't squish a bug, blah, blah. They were also the humanitarians. They were the ones that everyone is good, so we must take care of everyone, and we must be good to blah, 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 okay? They also believe that everything happened by chance, that you have no control over anything, and everything happens by chance. So if you believe everything happens by chance, you don't really believe anybody cares what happens to you, and you have to do everything on your own to be under self-control, then it's easy to see that they don't really believe in a God that has any accountability on them either. So even though they're kind of opposite each other, they're both wrong, and they're both lost. And so these two groups of philosophers are debating with Paul, okay? It says, some of them ask, what's this babbler trying to say? And the word for babbler there is a seed picker, which is kind of strange. But it really says, what is this idle babbler? The seed picker was a little sparrow that picked things out of the gutter or under the tables or out of the cracks of the rocks or whatever. They didn't care what it was, where the seeds came from or anything else. And so the idea is they lived on whatever they could find, a little here, a little there, a little here, a little there. And that word, seed picker, got transferred over to these debaters, these philosophers, these armchair philosophers who filled the agora on the weekends with their basket that you could throw coins in, you know. And the ones that the sophisticated philosophers thought were worthless, they called them seed pickers, saying, well, you've taken an idea from here, and you've taken an idea from here, and you've taken a little bit over here, and you really don't have any new truth at all, and you have no idea what you're really talking about. Don't listen to them, they're worthless. And so that's what they're calling Paul. So that's what they think about what he's telling them, Okay? So these are the mockers, right? So they're mocking him. But that's nothing new. Paul's been mocked in every city he's gone to, right? They're mocking him, all right? So he's being accused that he has no real education and that he's an armchair thinker, okay? But then there's another group, the confused. The other ones, they're remarking, he seems to be advocating foreign gods. Okay? Wait a minute. This guy doesn't fit into the Epicureans. He doesn't fit into the Stoics. He doesn't even fit in with the Cynics. What kind of gods are he talking about? A new god. We're all about new gods. Let's talk about this. What else is he going to tell us about? And notice it said foreign gods, plural. And then Luke goes on and goes, well, they said plural, or they said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Well, that doesn't really make much sense to us, except in Greek, the word for resurrection is anastasis. And Anastasia is a female name. And in the Greek mythology, gods always come in pairs. There's a male god and a female god for every single thing, okay? So this Jesus must have a female counterpart named Anastasia. And that's how they're coming up. He's talking about some foreign gods, and that's why they say it's plural, because they think he's talking about a pair of gods. It says, then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus. The word Areopagus means the hill of Ares. Ares was a Greek god. The Roman counterpart for Ares is Mars. So it's like a Mars hill or a hill of Mars, which the name of that comes from because there was a place in the city where this is a court. It used to be a tribunal, 3 men, okay, in ancient Greece, right? And they would meet to discuss things on this hill called the Hill of Ares, or the Hill of Mars, Mars Hill. But at this point in time, there are about 30 of them. There's no longer just 3, and now it's the name of the court. They no longer meet on that hill in Paul's day, but that's the court itself has taken the name of that, okay? So he gets brought to the Areopagus. Now he's not been formally charged, he's not been arrested, but it's their responsibility to vet all these guys who are teaching anything that seems radically new. If you're just teaching bits and pieces of stuff and you don't really know what you're talking about, they just leave you alone, let you go and collect your coins, okay? But what Paul's talking about is radical. It's totally different. People rising from the dead? Now that's not in any of their stuff, especially when you got Epicureans that don't believe in an afterlife, right? So they want to find out what he's talking about. So it's not a trial. So he's being brought before them. It says they take him to a meeting of the Areopagus where they said to him, may we know what this new teaching is that you're presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we'd like to know what they mean. These are the curious. They're curious about what it is he's really saying, and they want to know more about that, okay? So you might think, well, good, they want to listen. They want the whole story. But really, they're just trying to find out if he's a threat or not. If he's a threat to Greece, if he's a threat to Rome, or if he's a threat to their finances or whatever. They're just the curious, and they're not really that spiritually involved yet. And Luke makes that clear because he puts this little information in parentheses for us, and he says, yeah, all the Athenians, all the people of Athens, and the foreigners who live there, they spend their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. What does that sound like in our day? What's that? Representatives? Yeah, that could be, yeah. 10 years ago, I would have said this sounds like talk radio in our world. What's replaced that now? Podcasts, the internet, Instagram, Facebook. Everybody and his brother has an opinion, right? Yeah. Well, a step up from Let It Out Shelbyville. You have these people who consider themselves to be influencers, and why are they doing it? Because they get paid. Because every time you like it or every time you share it, they get a few pennies. And they get enough of those shares and they get enough of those likes, and sponsors, they're making a lot of money. They're not any different than these people spouting their ideas. If you want advice on parenting, I guarantee you can go on your Instagram and you can find out advice on parenting, grandparenting, your marriage, how to fix your car, how to cook meals, how to be a traditional wife versus a non-traditional wife. Just name it, whatever it is. How to date, how not to date. It's all kinds of information. Everybody's got a philosophy. And it says these people spend their time doing nothing but talking. That's the influencers. And listening, that's the scrollers, okay? That's the people who are paying attention to all this stuff, to the latest ideas. Boy, it sure sounds like nothing's changed to me. So Paul, he stands up. Standing was the position of teaching, or he's on the spot here. He's answering these guys. They're sitting around, and he stands, and he's going to defend himself in the meeting of the Areopagus, and he says, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you're very religious." So he does not start out with the Jews. He always starts out with Abraham. He starts out with the Old Testament. He starts out with prophecy. He starts out with something from their history. He doesn't do any of that. It'd be pointless here. It would be pointless. He doesn't even start out with the creation of the world. He doesn't do any of that. I see that in every way you are very religious. Okay, they can take that as a compliment, right? For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, "To an unknown God." To an unknown God. Well, yeah, we got it, one of those, to an unknown God. So if you have, what was it, Mike, 73,000 idols, that pretty much covers everything, doesn't it? I would think so too. But if you have a God for everything, and then you also have to have an unknown God, what's the purpose of the unknown God? Cover everything else. Cover your bases, right? So what does that say about the other 73,000? Yeah, I think you're right. There's still something lacking. 73,000 items, and you still don't have all your bases covered? That there's something still lacking? And they don't even know what it is that's lacking. Otherwise, they would have given it a name, right? It would have been the God of blah, whatever. But they haven't even given it a name. But they know something's lacking. They just don't know what it is. They are lost. And so that's what it says about all their other gods. All these gods together can't satisfy. And so he says, I see you have that. And then he says, very bluntly, he goes, well, this tells me you're ignorant of the very thing that you worship. You don't even know what it is you're worshiping. And this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. This unknown God, I know who he is. He says, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples made by human hands. Now say that in a city that has 73,000 idols made by human hands. Probably not going to be very popular there either, are you? And a lot of people made money from those. And they make copies of them and they sell them and they make a lot of money from that too. But he says he doesn't live in temples built by your hands. And he is not served by your human hands. And some churches need to hear that. Some Christians need to hear that. As if he needed anything from us. Sometimes we feel like we need to tithe because God needs our money. Or we need to worship because God needs our worship. Or we need to praise because God needs our praise. God does not need anything from us. But we are to reflect his glory through gratitude and awe and praise back to him for what he has done, not for what we're doing. But so they don't get any of that. And he says, and instead, or rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else you have. He is the source of everything. He created everything. You can't give him anything that he needs. You can't serve him with human hands. You can't build his image. You can't make an image of him. He gives everybody, every human breath, life, and everything else. And then he says, from one man, he made all the nations. Now, that is not a Roman or Greek belief, okay, if you go back into the mythology and all that. And today, we have a similar situation. Non-believers, how do they believe mankind started? The Big Bang, out of the primordial ooze, as a worm or a fish, the gruesome limbs, and lots of them happened, right? Paul sets them straight. From one man, he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth. He made one man have all his family, and they're going to inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out the appointed places where each of these tribes would live. So he's telling them, God marked out where you will live, where this country of yours will live. He marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. Now, Greece has already had an appointed time in history, and it's over for them. They're now under Rome. Okay? They used to be a whole lot bigger. They're a whole lot smaller now. And he says, God appointed your times in history, and he appointed the boundaries for your lands. And he says God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far from any one of us. God did this to show you that he is sovereign, he's in control, and that so that you would reach for him, and he wants to be found. He's close by. And then he says, for in him we live and move and have our being. And that's one of their Greek poet lines. And then he quotes another one. And some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. We are God's, the offspring of the gods. And if without the gods, we wouldn't be able to live or move or have our being. It all comes from, and he's saying, yes, that's this unknown God. He does it all. You don't need this other 73,000 or whatever it is, as some of your own poets have said. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. Because we're not like any of those idols. What's the difference between us and any of those 73,000 idols? Well, what did the poet say? We live and move and have our being. If we are that far different than the idols, how in the world could we think the idols are gods? Makes no sense. Makes no sense. They can't be made of gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill, because we, who we understand we're less than God, are at least that. We are at least alive and moving and have a being, but they don't. It says, in the past, God overlooked such ignorance. He graciously, in his mercy, overlooked your following these pagan gods. He says, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. Oh my gosh, repent? Epicureans don't believe there's any accountability for anything. What do you have to repent? Now, if there's no heaven and there's no hell and there's no life after death, there's also no judge. So why repent? And so he's really bravely, boldly preaching the gospel here to people who have no background in what he's talking about. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. So now they're finding out that this God has a man that he's appointed one day, and he's appointed the day, and he's appointed the man that everyone will be judged, okay? That there is something after death, and there's going to be a judgment. And he says he's given proof of this to everyone by raising this man from the dead. That's where we got the anastasis from in here, okay? When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered. Yep. When you teach the gospel now, there are people that sneer. When you talk about the virgin birth, they say it's a fairy tale. When they talk about Jesus rising from the dead, they have all these theories about how he was drugged and walked out of the tomb when the cool air hit him and all that. Some of them sneered. Those are the mockers. But others said, we want to hear you again on this subject. Stop talking right now. We've had enough, but we'll listen to you some more later. Kind of like Felix said, oh, no, I don't want to hear anymore. I don't want to hear anymore. Like with John the Baptist, with Herod, and Herod kept wanting to talk with him and all these questions, but he never would, make a decision. Well, I'll hear some more from you again later. So these are the postponers, the procrastinators. So Paul leaves the council. At that, he walked out. He wasn't a prisoner. He'd explained exactly what he came to explain. So this is a tactic on Paul's behalf. If he walks out, he'll quickly know who believes a stitch of anything he said. How will he know? Who will follow him? Who will walk out the door with him wanting to talk more? And so he walks out of the council. Some of the people became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus. He's one of the court guys. He's one of the judges. He's a member of that council. He's a leader of the city of Athens with its 73,000 idols, and he becomes a believer. And a woman named Damaris, and we don't know another thing about her, and I think it's the idea that a guy from the very top and a woman probably from the very bottom, and they both believed. They both believed. And a number of others. The word for followers there is the Greek word for glue. And some of the people glued themselves to Paul and followed him. So they wanted to hear more. They wanted to know what he was talking about. Paul later on tells us a couple of things. When he talks about his glory, he said, all of this is for your benefit, so that the grace that is extending to more and more people may overflow in thanksgiving to the glory of God. He's giving the people in Corinth the reason that they need to be talking to other people about the gospel. Because the more people who hear it and the more people who believe it, the more people who will praise and worship God. And that's what we're supposed to be about. We're supposed to be making sure that God gets the glory he deserves. And anybody you pull out of paganism or atheism is one more person who can give glory to God. And that's the idea, so that it can overflow in thanksgiving to the glory of God. And then very practically, he tells the Corinthians, no matter what you're doing, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. And he's not just talking about eating food and drinking water. He's talking about the difference of whether you're going to eat meat to idols or not eat meat to idols, or whether you're going to drink alcoholic beverages or you're not going to drink alcoholic beverages, or you're going to drink wine that was brought to the temple, or you're not going to drink wine that was brought to a pagan temple. He goes, no matter what it is, just remember that whatever you're doing, you're supposed to be doing it to the glory of God, and do it with a clean conscience, and do it to the glory of God. And if you can't do it with a clean conscience, then you shouldn't be doing it. That's his point. Also, he tells us in Colossians, beware, take care, lest there be one who leads you away as prisoners by means of his philosophy.
Your screen's not on, Carol.
This thing keeps falling out. It won't stay in. I don't know if it's my computer or the cord. There we go. Take care lest there be someone who leads you away as prisoners by means of his philosophy and idle fancies, following human traditions and the world's crude notions instead of following Christ. I mean, that's great advice. Be careful that you don't get caught up in the web of believing what's popular and what people accept, and that you accept those things as facts when you don't have any real evidence that they're facts. But if it's the next new belief thing, don't hop on board. Continue to follow Christ. So if you think about it, we're a long way from Athens, but not really. Athena is the goddess of wisdom and power, and we worship those things in our culture. We worship the powerful, we worship the smart, we want our kids to have the best education. We think intelligence is a high level. Worshiping Mother Earth, well, now we call it ecology, or the, what do you call that? The DNR. Yeah. Worshiping the earth and saving animals instead of people. Zeus was the god of force and the god of power. We do that. Bacchus and Rumor were the gods of lust and alcohol. We have monuments and idols to that everywhere you go. Go try to see a ball game without seeing advertisements for alcohol and whatever else. We have shrines, I guess you would say, to those. We still have people who believe like the Epicureans and the Stoics and everything else in between, people who are hedonists. Hedonists mean get all the pleasure you can, okay? We also have people on the other end of it that believe that the best thing in life you can do is help the poor, do everything you can for the downtrodden, and all that. We also have lots of people who believe that God is everywhere, and everything is God, and God's in all of us, and we're all good. None of those things are biblical, by the way, okay? So what do we see when we look at our city? What do you see when you think about Shelbyville? What do we see? There's some good things. I love our trails. A statue of a guy holding two bears, yeah, he was an author, yeah. Oh, we have the wind thing out here too, in the park. What's that called, Helbing, or whatever? Yeah, what is it, Helbing? I didn't realize what that thing was till they moved out there. When they had it downtown, I couldn't tell what it was. But when they moved out here, and if you look at it from the front, it's the map of all the rivers through Shelby County. It's really cool. There's a plaque now there that tells you that too. It's really cool. And all that stuff behind it is supposed to be clouds and wind and rain, feeding the rivers that go through Shelby County. So it's not as bad as I thought it was once I figured that out. Before I thought, I could have done that. Now I'm pretty sure I couldn't have. All right. Do we see God's glory being robbed in our city, in our culture? Do we put up with things we shouldn't? Are we concerned about it? Paul made a claim on the city of Athens. He claimed it for Christ. Are we claiming our city for Christ? It won't ever happen until we get provoked, until we get stirred up in our spirit, and enough not to just be upset, but enough to take action. So what are we doing?
You know, what Paul did, going out, just talking to people, that reminds me of, like, in the bigger cities where you've got the raggedy-looking dudes walking around with a big sign.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
About
Yep.
that's
Yeah. And you have guys with microphones going around asking people questions all the time, and Charlie Kirk answering questions on college campuses, and other people who do the same thing. Yeah. So, any ideas? What we should be doing?